TV.com. And if I stumble over that again, we're going to have to take me back to the pale. I have to do that myself and throw myself out. They don't throw me out of the studio here. They pretty much go along with what we're doing. I want to commend the technicians again for the fine job they're doing, and any failures that we have in terms of the program that comes on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on allflinttalkradio.com. Let me get that straight.
AllPointsTV.com.
Allpointstv.com. I want to make sure they're not the one getting the blame for the faux pas that we make here. We take they I take all the credit, but I also take all the all the blame too. I have to even this stuff up, and that is to take. We believe in accountability here, and we call for it in others, and we expect it of ourselves as well. But I do want to commend the staff here. They do a fine job, and anytime you see the program going up and having the clarity that it has in terms of the sound and the visuals, that's not by accident. We have some excellent people working here on the staff, and they do a fine job. I want to commend them for it. Uh, I don't think I'm going to have any friends after this program. After this program is over, as if I have a whole lot of friends to start out with, because I'm doing some things that I know are not necessarily the going rate in our community. But I'm going to say it anyway, and I'm going to do what I think needs to be done to speak the truth to power. Everybody wants to speak the truth to power. I want to speak the truth to everybody. And those that have no power, I don't know why they have to be overlooked and not having the truth spoken to them. I want to speak the truth to everybody, and I'm gonna do that to the extent that I understand it myself, and I'm gonna do it unapologetically, as I'm gonna do today, in a very controversial topic, which I wrote about today on Facebook. And what I'm doing is a 3-part series on Facebook, and I did part 2 today, and I was speaking about the setup, and it was a setup of Donald Trump in the aftermath of the 2016 election, which this man took by storm. They never thought this man had a chance. And for him to have come out of nowhere in terms of the political arena, never had a political position before, and then didn't have any military experience, which is really one of the two, or maybe both, that every presidential candidate has had in the past that's ever been elected to that office. If you didn't have military experience and didn't have political experience, you were not elected to the presidency in this country. That had been the history of the country up until 2016. And based upon that history and that circumstance, I think there's one reason why nobody gave this man the chance to be president, because he was doing something that was unprecedented. And for him to come out of the woodwork, even though he had a resume in the business world, this man was a mogul as far as his building prowess was concerned in New York. This man is a builder and had a strong resume in that regard. This man was a consummate businessman. But for him to come into the political arena where the sharks are, and these are not the sharks like the Shark Tank they have on television with this owner. I think he's still the owner of is it the Mavericks basketball team. One of the uh, Cu- Cuban, I think his name is. Um, I'm not talking about that kind of shark. I'm not the sharks in the political arena. These are the real sharks. That if you're not really astute in the political arena, you're getting eaten alive by these sharks, because these people are not playing. They're here to protect their own turf, and they're here to make sure that those that invade that turf, that are trying to bring about anything that upsets the apple cart and bring about some result that's not palatable to those, is in terms of that. Uh, I call it the sniper's nest. But in that power group, people are there to protect their own political interests, and their economic interests, and anyone that threatens that, they're gonna have a large problem. And Donald Trump coming into that arena without any resume, and I say without any resume, but I'm talking about without any political resume and military resume, without any of the credentials that you've had to have in the past to become president, for him to do that, or even to attempt it, something that had never been done before, made him a laughing stock. And nobody took his candidacy seriously, thinking this was the same old, same old. Because a lot of people have tried it from the outside. You remember Ross Perot's campaign. There's a guy named Stasson that ran, I think, 5 times for president. He got turned down each time because it's unheralded for a person to have that kind of resume and then be running for the highest office in the land. It's just not something that you do or you see every day. And a few times you have seen it, the voters were turning that down. And then Donald Trump comes along, and then this man had no creds because he was neither credentialed militarily nor credentialed politically, and was considered to be a laughing stock, the Donald and so on and so forth. It was amazing. A lot of persons. It wasn't that his talent was unseen, because I can remember when Oprah had me on a show a number of times, and every time she had him on there, she saw the talent the man had, and she was always asking him if he's going to ever run for president. And he always said he didn't see himself running, but he did. He did understand that the job wasn't being done by those that were in the Beltway, and that he didn't think that if he ran he would lose, and he didn't think it would be an insurmountable, you know, mountain to climb. No political resume, no military background, but he just wasn't interested in doing that because he saw his talent in a whole different area. But Oprah would actually, I would notice when she bring him on there, that she was always bowing to the real evidence that he would exude in the program, and whenever he's interviewed, there's obviously man was not some Johnny come lately type of person that didn't have any. This was a very talented man. That was very obvious. And then when he was talking, this man was a man of substance. You could actually learn something from what this man was saying. It wasn't it wasn't like it was last night on that interview that they had on this program on the program by the great one, Mark Levine. You call him the great one. And they had Sean Hannity interviewing Mark Levine on his new book that comes out tomorrow on the 29th, called I think the title of it is Tyler's on Power. He's commenting on power. If I'm not a Mark Levine fan as far as reading his books, because I do think he has something to say. He's not as gifted as he thinks he is in terms of some of the areas he's in. And he's not the scholar in the Constitution he thinks he is. But he does, when he writes his books, he does his homework. He does research. But if I was reading that book that's coming out tomorrow, based on an interview that Sean Hannity did last night on Mark Levine, I wouldn't not based on that interview would I be buying the book, because that was one of the worst interviews I've ever seen. that was, that I think I might have listened to that interview last night. If they After the interview was over, I think everybody in the country that listened to that interview was dumber after the interview was dumber for having sat there for an hour and listened to that interview, because that was one of the worst interviews I've ever. Sean Hannity, you didn't do it. That interview was terrible. But anyway, um, you know, I'm going to read the book because I'm a fan of Mark Levine's of his writing because there are some very good books he's written, and I'm a fan of the research that he does and the amount of time he puts into it. I put him on the same level. I don't put him on the same level as Thomas Sowell, but I put him on the same level as Ann Coulter because when Ann Coulter writes a book, I'm very much interested in putting time into reading it because I know that's going to be well researched. Whatever she's writing, she does her homework and makes sure that she's dotted her I's and crossed her T's and has researched the topic that she's writing on. And I can trust that I can trust I'm going to learn something rather than sit there for uh, the whole time they have to read the book. I try to spend I try to try to read when I'm reading a book. I try to delegate at least 50 pages a day to get the book read expeditiously, so that when I go and I look at how many pages the book has, if it's 350 pages, I say, okay, I'm going to read that book in a week because I'm not just reading the book; I'm doing some other things as well. But I don't want to park myself into a seat and then have so much to do, and then on top of that, these books, I have to read them to keep on top of what's being said. So I kind of, whatever number of pages the book is, I divide it by the number of days I want to spend reading, and I divide that into number of pages. And that's how many days that I'm get to clock those days every day and have that many pages read. That's how I read. That's how I go through the books. So I go through a lot of books, and I just have to, you know, proof go through it through a proofreading type of thing. Some of them I underscore as well because those are books I want to use as references, and I do a lot of that with Mark Levine's books because there are certain books I need to have as references for other things I'm writing, and I use that as a jump off point. Coulter's book are the same way. There are not too many writers like that. I also do it with Thomas Sowell. Let's see who are some others. Not too many, but those persons that are the deep thinkers and don't shoot from the hip and just writing opinions one after the other without any research being done, nothing, no content behind it. Like Jesse Lee Peterson's books. I like him, but I don't. He's not one of those writers that. I mean, he's very opinionated, and he is differently opinionated than a lot of the person out there, and I respect him for his not towing the line and not being afraid, not being afraid to be out there with the position that he takes. So he takes a lot of unpopular positions, as do I, and it takes a lot of courage. But if you are if you a truth seeker and you're a truth teller, you're not going to have a lot of people that's applauding what you're doing. If you need that kind of accommodation to feel good about the case you're making, if you need that, you're not going to get that from. You cannot be a truth seeker and truth teller and be expecting popularity as a result of it. So I'm writing. I wrote yesterday and today the two parts or 3 part series. I'm finishing up tomorrow, and tomorrow I'll be taking on this judge um, Boasberg, James Boasberg. I'm taking him on in part 3 of the series, where I'm saying that the title of it is uh, the craziest um, thing you'll ever see in the political arena, and that is President of the United States groveling as Donald Trump is doing. I have a lot of a lot of what? A lot of respect for Donald Trump's courage. But I am not buying into what a lot of the person that read my posts are buying into, saying the man is not a politician. Donald Trump is a politician. That's what people are missing, by the way, when they do these they do this uh, listing who are the great presidents. You can just stop with George Washington, but they want to make but those that write about the greatness of George Washington want to make George Washington a non-politician. George Washington was a consummate. George Washington was a politician, but the difference between him and Trump has that characteristic too. Is difference is that they are patriotic politicians. George Washington was a politician. And what people are missing with Donald Trump is a politician too. Don't be telling me that the man is not a politician. He is a politician, but he's a patriot, and that separates him from the rest of those people in Washington who are scoundrels because they're just politicians. That's all they are. That's what people are missing in terms of their analysis of these presidents. I'm correcting all of them. That's what George Moss is doing because they're not on this level. That's all of them. You don't see them saying. You don't see a scholar saying anything out here. They know I'm out here too, and they you'd be surprised at what I find out that they're saying behind the closed doors. But they're not saying it out in public. They know they're not qualified. They're quiet in public, and they're gonna remain quiet. And I'm gonna tell them why they're gonna remain quiet because they're not on this level. And that's Turley, that's Alan Dershowitz, and that's John Yu. These are the ones they put on TV. And that right there raises a question because they don't put anybody on television that's going to shake the. It may get them on to shake their head, or in the dance area, they may be shaking something else. But if they're shaking up the system, they're not going to be on television. You can believe that. They're not on there to shake the system up. They're there to accommodate what the system is in fact trying to plant in terms of the seeding of the country, because the country's interest among the rulers is control of the population, so they don't go out of control and threaten their power. That's what they're not going to bring people on there under the FCC licensing board that they have to go to have these stations licensed. They're going to bring people on there that's going to challenge the network and so on and so forth. They're not going to do that. But they're going. But I know what they're saying because it gets out what they're saying behind the closed doors and quiet off screen and things like that. But not going. They're not. I'm just going to tell them they're not qualified to challenge what I'm talking about. Not in terms of the Constitution because they don't understand it like I understand it. And I found that out when I was in grad school. And that's just the way it is. I'm Walter Cronkite, and that's the way that's the way it really is. They're not on this level. They know they're not on this level. What they're saying, song and dance and chapter and verse. They're not able to do what you see being done, and that's in my writing, and also in this program. I'm shaking the whole system up, but they don't put a George Moss. Nor do I cater to that because I am not fit for television. They don't. Then you're not gonna pigeonhole me in that TV landscape and then mute my voice because I understand the controls I'm walking into based upon the fact that those persons have to be guided through certain things in order to maintain their bottom line. Their bottom line really is commercial. These are commercial networks. I understand the bottom line and what they must do and why they do it. I don't ask anybody to be out there being a kamikaze representative either. I don't expect anybody to go out there and cut their head off and be sacrificial in terms of their uh, imploding because they're not there for that purpose. They're there to make uh, a profit. If they can make a difference, that's icing on the cake. But they doesn't make a profit, and to the extent they can make a difference in that, that's to the good, and I commend them for that. But they're not there primarily for that reason. They're there to make money. Murdoch and the rest of them, Roger Ailes when he was there and alive, and bless his heart, and so on, and hope he goes on to greater things in another world, and so on. And he deserves it to an extent. And he's not perfect, but I don't expect perfection. We need to stop that. We need to stop expecting people. People got on my wall yesterday. Got on my wall because I was. They thought because I support Donald Trump that I am in fact of dyed in the wool support of everything the man does. The man is not a saint. We didn't vote for him. I would in the political arena. I wouldn't vote for him if he were a saint, because if he's a saint, he shouldn't be out there in that arena, because that's not a place for saints. And we need to stop expecting Donald Trump to be a saint. Donald Trump and people tell he's not a politician. Give me a break. He is a politician. And don't get me started on that, because I didn't come here to talk about that. But but don't get me started on that, because y'all got to stop saying that. Get on my post talking about he is a politician. Shut up. And I would like to give you some examples. I don't want. I got something else I got to do today. And what I came here to do today is something that's going to make me even more unpopular, because I'm here to call for the indictment, the charge of the first acknowledged, and I want to make that very clear, the first acknowledged black president of the United States. Acknowledged black president of the United States. This is not the first black president of the United States, the first acknowledged black president of the United States. And you can go read the pamphlet by J.E. Rogers and see what I'm talking about there. He got a picture of Warren G. Harding on the front cover of that. It's a red pamphlet that's put out by the great Joel A. Rogers, who was writing back in the 40s and so on and so forth. He has a little pamphlet out called The Five Negro Presidents. And that's been upgraded by a person who wrote a larger publication, Dr. Alset Bakufu, who wrote a book called The Six Black Presidents. This is before Obama was elected. So I call Obama the first acknowledged black president, and I put quotation marks around that, because if this man was a black president, he's not qualified to be president of the United States, because his mother was not from Kenya. That's his daddy. And his daddy, if he's running because he's black and his dad is in Kenya, then he's ineligible to run based upon that particular physical characteristic, because his daddy was never an American citizen, and you have to be a natural born citizen of this country. And he's only a natural born citizen if his mother is through that natural birth birthright claim that's being made. He's making the claim based on his father's racial and identity, then the man is a black Kenyan. And that makes Obama, and this got me in a lot of trouble when I said this back in 2010, the year after I found out what this guy was actually doing in the White House. And I came out against him at that time period. And God, you'd be surprised of all of the noise I had to hear about that. I didn't care about the noise. All that noise, all that does is ground me into more. I'm going to fight harder, because I'm going to sit you down, because I know what you don't know, and that is this: you're not qualified to challenge anything that I say. You're not qualified to shine my shoes. That's all of you. I don't care what they say. I'm telling you, forget that. I wrote this post today called "The Setup," because I want to show how I want to show in that part two how they set Donald Trump up. But here's and although Tulsi Gabbard is doing a great job in pointing out what all of them are missing, including Tulsi Gabbard, in terms of them having um, recognized that this idea that Putin favored Donald Trump in the election of 2016, they're right in saying that Putin did not favor Hillary Clinton, did not favor Donald Trump in the election of 2016. He favored Hillary Clinton. But what they've not figured out is why he favored Hillary Clinton. But yeah, he didn't favor Donald Trump in that election. In fact, the idea that he favored Hillary Clinton in that election is not only a fake news, it's preposterous. Because that would be to say that he is favoring a patriot, American patriot, and that's not what a person that would be in Russia would have. Why would a person that's a Russian nationalist favor a person running for president that's American patriot? That's not what it was about. And I wrote about it today. Nobody has written about it from this angle. I wrote about it about Putin favoring Hillary Clinton in the election in 2016, and that's why he believed. That's why he listen to this very carefully. That's why he went along with them saying that uh, Putin was supporting Donald Trump. He went along with that, and so people would be asking then the question, since I took the position that I did, that Putin was a supporter of Hillary Clinton and not Donald Trump in the 2016 election. And the question is then, why would Putin then do that in terms of being supportive of Hillary Clinton and be quiet about the accusation that they were making that he was a supporter of Donald Trump? Well, number one, he didn't think that Donald Trump was going to win. And number two, by supporting Hillary Clinton, by being quiet about what he knew was going on inside of her campaign. He knew that dossier was a fake dossier. The Christopher Steele dossier was a red herring. He knew that, but he remained quiet. Why? Because he wanted her to be in there, and once get in there, would hold that over her head for blackmail. Would be his advantage in terms of it. Hold that over her head as a way of holding blackmail of how she got into the presidential office by being quiet about what he knew. Did not pull the trigger on that and expose her because he expected her to win anyway, whether expose her or not. But then be able to, when she gets in, then to hold that as a card carrying communist in his regard, to be supporting somebody on the left as she is on the left with a Solinsky kind of outlook, not very different than the person now mad about running in New York. This my man Manda, what's the guy's name over there in New York, run for mayor? Not they all, you see, this coming out of the woodwork. They're coming out now to show that is where they are over in that party. That party is a communist party. And that wasn't supposed to be sprung until they got into solidifying the power and then come out of the woodwork to show who they really are behind those masks that they are wearing, because these people are disguised in Washington. The difference between them and Trump is that Trump is and this is what people are missing, is that Trump is a politician patriot, or a patriotic politician, that you could say. Wherein they're just politicians, and that just means that they are the run of the mill, same old, same old. They're a bunch of rats. Do you think they're different than that? Boy, are you in for a rude awakening. They don't want him in that house because That house is the ultimate power center of the country. No matter who's in that house, that's the power center right there. And Donald Trump, as an outsider who didn't have the resume they expect you to have in order to be president of the United States, didn't have any of the two characteristics that you had to have in the past before he broke the mold and created a mold different from the mold that was set by the great George Washington. But he shares with George Washington a characteristic George Washington had, but George Washington was a politician. Go read it. Go read the books about George Washington. Read Chanel's book. Read this book. What's that writer's name? I can't. I never. His name always escapes me because it's such an unusual name. But he's the main. I think he's a major voice and a major writer of that time period. The one that wrote the book called "The Election of 18." The tumultuous election of 1800. That's a very good book and that writer. This is a very good author, and I need to remember his name because everything I read, I read 3 books by him, and everything I read by him, I've been really just blown away by the things this man has done in his research. But if anybody thinks he's making the case that George Washington was not a politician, or you can make that case that George Washington was not a politician. George Washington was a politician, but he's also a patriot. And that's what see, people don't. Let me say this. Look, I don't agree with you when you say that history is written by the victors write history. That's not true. Anybody can write history, but in order to write, those who write history are parrots. Parrots write history. Now the question is, what kind of parrot are you in term, and that's also about what kind of politician are you. Politicians are in politics. The question is, what kind of politician are you? And these are Rudy Pooks. These are the run-of-the-mill politicians that's in power. And I call them what they are. They're a bunch of rats. If you can name a patriot that's in office, that's been elected to office, if you can name one outside of Donald Trump, write it down and send it. Yeah, you gonna just think up some names here. You haven't thought about this, but I'm gonna tell you this: you're gonna be surprised and trying to think about it now to find out you can't come up with any names. I can imagine some of the person that you would mention. Louisiana Senator Kennedy, John Kennedy in Louisiana, in that lot, or Ted Cruz from Texas. You would think of those names. Yeah, them too. I'm not going to sugarcoat any of it. They're just lesser in that regard than these others are. Some of them you can hardly stomach the ones who are much worse on the left than they are, like Charles Schumer, like Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, like Rashida Tlaib, like Ilma Omar, like Jasmine Crockett, like Maxine Waters, like Hakeem Jeffries. These are shysters, every last one of them. I call them out because I don't have any respect for them, and I want them to know I don't have any respect for them. I am their worst nightmare, and intend to be that. I'm not playing the games here. And that's what they know, those that know I'm out here. And they know I'm out here. I'm not playing the games. I'm the I am what Eric Hoffa was writing about. I'm the true believer. And sometimes that's to a fault, but I know I know what the true believer looks like. I know their character, and I know the kind of things that represents, and how lonely that representation can be sometimes. But these are the price you have to pay. You have got to have integrity. And I call in part two of the three-part series I'm doing, and I call for it unequivocally, resolutely, and unapologetically. I call for the placement of Barack Obama on trial for treason, because that man, that's what this man is guilty of. Now, I don't think you can just simply make the charge and walk away from it. The man is owed due process. But I wrote about what occurred when this man. I wrote about it in part two of this three-part series that I call it the setup. Because after having said that, and his words were, and I quote, "I just don't think that Mr. Trump will ever be president, and he has the right to say that and believe that, and so on and so forth. And he has not crossed any red line by both saying it and believing it." But when it did not happen, and Donald Trump became president, he, Barack Obama didn't cross any red lines in saying it and believing it. He crossed a red line when it did not happen. And by it not happening and Donald Trump winning against all of the odds in 44 different instances in the past, and all of that history weighed against him, all that precedent before him weighing against him, the man did what was considered to be impossible. And it's when he accomplished that against them saying, "Mr. Trump, I don't think Mr. Trump will be president of the United States," and became president. None of that is beyond the pale, and none of it crosses the red line. What crossed the red line was when that did not prevail, and then they crossed the red line by doing things to then make the that which was a fait accompli that they didn't see, to now make that what did not happen by now working in conjoint with those elements out there that did not want to happen too, and that was people like Putin, for example. And that's where the treason comes in. Those joining those forces, both inside the country and outside the country, they wanted to overturn the due election of the president, number 45, in 2016, to begin to work against that and try to undermine that and undo that. And when they began to enter into that in collusion, the collusion they were accusing Trump of, I'm the only one saying this in this country. The collusion that in fact crossed the red line was working with insiders and outsiders that understood the danger this man posed, both on the domestic front and on the international front as well. This man posed a threat for Putin. Hillary Clinton would not oppose this threat to Putin, because Putin would have had that over her head that she had become president because of the false Christopher Steele dossier that she paid for, and everybody knew it was false. They knew this was a false dossier that had been put together. John Brennan, the director of the CIA, knew it. Um, Barack Obama knew it. Hillary Clinton paid for it, so she knew it. She paid for it, and Putin knew it. And they were working informally on the same team. I know it's hard for you to believe. Putin wanted Hillary Clinton in the White House, but he wanted it in there for the reason that the Russian president would want her in the White House and not want Donald Trump in there. It's not like you have to have a formal alliance. Let me say this. I'm probably getting too far off track when I bring this in, but everybody thinks it's hard for people to believe that people will get together and conspire to as they did in John F. Kennedy's assassination. They think that you have to have some mammoth, uh, behind the scenes planning and so on and so forth, and lay that out, and all that. You know what? That stuff. That's how you do it in Hollywood.
Okay, let's look at it this way. One guy said, if you call your friend, I think it was Chris Lovell said it. He said, if you call your friend and say, hey, let's meet here so for lunch, you're actually conspiring to have lunch. All right. So I mean, so if you're just saying, I'm going to back this person because I see and I know how they're going, I'm going to back them. Okay, that's a plan,
Right?
And
Yeah.
they'll accept it. So in the form they are part, even if there's no direct expressive thing, there is a conspiracy to move this thing in this direction. So
Right.
It's very easy to say conspiracy because everything is a conspiracy.
Tell me about it.
You conspired to come here today to do the podcast.
John, that's what persons have to understand. And you don't want to have a conspiracy where you have all these people that know about it, because then there's a liability because you got too many persons in the planning stages of it. Once it happens, then they can go and start sell you out and things like that. Somebody needs to go and listen to this guy named James Sutton. They didn't really listen to this guy. They didn't dismiss him. They're going to say, well, you mean to tell me that you just got together with what's Nicoletti and two of you were in that in Dilly Plaza. He's in the Dow Tex building, and you are in the Grassy Knoll area. And there's Malcolm Wallace on the 6th floor of the school book department. I know how they set it up. This man, but you don't have persons in the room smoking a cigar, and they'll be laying the stuff out and right now playing. That's not the way it works. That's Hollywood production. It was some people deciding this man had gotten in the White House because of the people backing him and putting themselves out there to back him. He gets in there and then turns his back on them and then betrays them and so on and so forth. They're going to they want to get him. And it's this person that was involved in maybe the Bay of Pigs, and that's where his angle is. And these people and this person is involved in it because they are the mafia members, and they've been hurt by Castro taking over the casinos in Cuba, in Havana, kicking the middle class out to Florida and saying to them, if you don't want to work, get out of here and go to Florida. And the whole middle class got on the plane and flew to Florida. That's why they there chomping at the bit. Well, you don't have to have all of them involved in anything. What you do is there's a betrayal at different levels here. And one betrayal is the mafia betrayal, because they're the ones that stole the election for Kennedy in 1960 in Chicago, certainly, and also in Missouri and a couple of other places, and put this man in there by the shenanigans of Kennedy's father, Joseph Kennedy. and they were making a pact with the mafia and so on and so forth. And they put him in there, and then he gets in there and starts to bite the hand that fed him and so on and so forth. That right there triggers that group. And then the Veil Pigs, which was what happened there in terms of them thinking they had firepower cover of the Air Force, and they didn't come, and they got shot up and tortured and things by Castro, who was waiting for them, and he felt betrayed. So there's a group there, and they're in Dealey Plaza. Fowles is in there, and Fowles does not know they know he's in there. They knew Fowles in there in '63. Fowles didn't think they knew about him until the 90s. They knew he was in. They knew that Fowles was in Dealey Plaza. He goes under the name James Fowles now. I think he is. I think he might. He was close to dying when I last saw him in a video production. But yeah, Fowles is the one. That Fowles is one of the ones in the grass and knoll. There are two grass and knoll areas, and there's a shooter on the right side and left side. That shooter on the left side is the one that fired that first shot that hit Kennedy in the throat. Kennedy was shot in the front. The first shot that hit Kennedy, Kennedy was hit 4 times. You can forget that magic bullet nonsense. The setup, and I wrote about the setup in terms of Barack Obama's involvement in the setup of Donald Trump. This was a setup. You have to look at patterns. And Donald Trump was set up. The treason of Barack Obama, and he deserves to have a trial and due process and all the rest of it. I'm not trying to take that from him, but I'm telling you the setup involved Barack Obama, because having announced I don't think Mr. Trump will ever be president of the United States, and he did not expect that. But when it happened, then Barack Obama set out to undo the political process, and he worked with foreign entities as well as domestic entities to rescind the result of the election of the United States of America. And when he did that, he's involved in treason. And I'm saying that on the air, and I know it's not going to be a popular thing to say, and I don't care who doesn't like it. I'm not throwing this out there without having thought about it and putting it together, what really happened here. They never thought Donald Trump will accomplish that. And they certainly didn't think he would come back. They tried to stop him from coming back. That's what this second impeachment was about. They realized the job had not been done because he wasn't convicted in the first impeachment. That's why the second impeachment was in fact leveled against him after the man was 7 days from leaving office on the 13th of January, 7 days before he was to leave office, and he was going to leave not because he had lost the election. He's going to leave because if he didn't leave, they're going to arrest him. And to his credit, he vacated the presidency. They were hoping he would not leave, and they would charge him with treason. But he left to fight another day, and he came back. But they were trying to prevent that. And that's what the second impeachment was about. All you scholars, you agree with me or not? Why would you impeach a man when the man is leaving office if you want to get rid of him? We're trying to keep him from coming back. That's what this second impeachment was about. The first impeachment did not prevail in terms of the removal. Impeachment is not removal. Impeachment is accusation. It's made in the House, and then you defend it in the Senate, where he's put on trial. If he's convicted in the Senate, then the impeachment is upheld. The removal takes place because of it being upheld. The Senate verdict is a removal verdict. That's what these so-called constitutional scholars don't understand. The Senate verdict is a removal verdict. It's not an impeachment verdict. Do you scholars agree with that? I know what you're saying on TV. You don't agree with it because I hear what you're saying on television. You're saying that you have to have treason, bribery, and other crimes and misdemeanors to bring about impeachment. Boy, are you stupid? Because that's so far from the truth, and no person is a constitutional scholar will ever say that. But I notice what they do though. They stay away from that area. They stay away from that. Jonathan Turley stays away from it. John Rue stays away from it. And when Alan Dershowitz was commenting on, he was out here in left field somewhere saying this stupid stuff about you have to have treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors in order to bring about impeachment. You have to be a lawyer to say that. You cannot be a constitutional scholar. He's not a constitutional scholar. He's a lawyer. And you can't say that if you're a constitutional scholar because no scholar of the Constitution will say that. You scholars that are saying that, you need to stop saying that. You're embarrassing yourself. Because that's not true. And you need to go back and read Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5 of the Constitution and understand that. To understand just that. And if you understood that, you would not say what Alan Dershowitz was saying, but to say that shows he doesn't understand it. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5 governs impeachment, tells where the impeachment takes place in the House of Representatives. But the impeachment is not removal. A lot of people think it's removal. It's not removal. The impeachment is the official accusation of wrongdoing while in office. You can't even impeach after the president office holder that can be impeached is removed from office because he has to be in office while you impeach him. You can't do it. You cannot impeach after the fact. You can't come back here as a Johnny come late and say, "Oh, I should have impeached him," and then do that work after it's over. And I will tell you this also: you cannot bring a president to trial. I know what you're saying up here in Washington. I'm challenging you on it. You're saying what you're saying is wrong. It cannot be. It's not grounded in the Constitution of the United States. You can't be talking about was he acting presidential when he did this act, and how you going to determine that? Here you are making some conjectural claim, and you're going to pick out what part of his actions are constitutional actions, and what part of his actions are not constitutional. Then try to get in that area, and then bring about a charge against the president because he wasn't acting in the presidency when he did this. That wasn't part of his job, and so on and so forth. The man, look here, man. Look, you scholars. You cannot, you can't be doing this picky uni stuff that you're doing. I'm telling you this. The man is acting in the office of the presidency. There's no requirement for you to pick out and conjecture what is actually part of the task and what's not part of the task. He's acting in the office of the presidency. If you have a problem with it, then here's how you rectify the problem. You bring the president up on charges while he's president of the United States. And then put him on trial because of that. And then if you put him on trial and you convict him, you move the umbrella of protection around him as president. And then when that umbrella of protection or hedge of protection, as I would like to call it, is removed from around the president, then you can try him as a John Blow citizen. But he's not a John Blow citizen when he's president. This man is the highest elected office holder in the United States of America, and that must be respected. That's what you respect. You chumps think you got to respect the man in the office. That's not where respect comes from.
That's what I always got tired of. I always heard you got to respect this person. You got to respect the police. No, that's a personal decision. I comply with a cop. I comply with what the law because I got a gun held to my head.
Right.
I don't respect thugs. Okay, and I'm so sick and tired because somebody occupies an office. I got to give them due difference. No, and they say, well, Christian's supposed to do this. I said, okay. Paul stood on principle when after they flogged him. He said, "Do you flog, Roman citizens?" And they went, "Oh my God, we did this." And he used his, and we have even more rights than a Roman citizen at that time. We have more rights. So obeying people or respecting people is BS. We don't have to do that in this country.
Yeah, that Ayn Rand understood this very well. They asked her with the way the way you've written your books, Atlas Shrugged, and other works you've written, where your philosophy comes through your writing. You're writing these novels, but your philosophy in those writings comes through. And if you really believe these things you're writing about, then why do you pay taxes? And Ayn Rand said, I pay taxes because if I don't pay taxes, I go to jail.
That's the thing. It's like, well, you got to. We got to just know. I mean, we have lost our guts in this country. We don't stand up to them. I don't like to go to like a meet and greet with a politician because I don't want to shake their hands. I don't know where that's been. Okay, and another thing is, yeah, I mean, they're thugs. There's no difference between the government and a mobster. They have people that are willing to do the dirty work. Kings and queens are the same way. Okay, I don't honor the royals because they're a bunch of thugs that got a bunch of other thugs to work for them. They conspired against everybody else. Why would I respect that?
John, you're using a word here that people are not willing to hear, but that's who they are. These are thugs in power, and they have the color of law under which they act. But when you justify the action, they can do things legally, which is in fact extort you for your money and call it taxes, and then spend it the way they want to spend it against your will. You don't have anything to say about it. And they're a mob acting against the will of so on and so forth, using the power of the state to enforce the validity of their actions, but their actions are not valid because taxation is theft, just like somebody else coming and using the threshold of influence peddling, and you have to pay for the influence. When the mafia charge you for turf, you pay for safety. They won't bother your business. Make sure nobody comes in and does things that they shouldn't do because you're being protected by the mob. Okay, that's what the politicians are doing. No different, but they have the color of law that validates their claim. A lot of persons go into areas where they have protection. A lot of these guys, these hoodlums on the street, like some of these televangelists on these major stations and stuff like that. You think these persons, these are hoodlums up there, and when they get caught, they want to talk about how they never claimed to be perfect and so on and so. Well, no, you didn't claim to be perfect. You claimed that you were, in fact, a member of the gospel and you were representative of it. And we found out you back there doing the same thing they're doing, taking people's money, and you involved in graft and money laundering and all the rest of it, like T.D. Jakes.
I don't understand. The thing is, we have a church here. I'm the Orbis Church. We need a roof on the house.
I'm calling the names out.
But we need a roof on it. But we're trying to raise funds for that. We can't get it. These guys, all they do is to teach how you can be prosperous. How they're prosperous because you tune in, buy their books, and give them money. That's how they're prosperous. You can, if you have the same platform, you could grant probably a big chunk of cash yourself.
Yeah, right? John, I want to read. I tell you what I want to do. You listeners, I want you to read this one page of a book written by this French writer named Constantine. Is C.F. Bonnet. Constantine Francis Bonnet, V at the end of the alphabet, Volney. This book has been translated out of the French into English. Jefferson, by the way, read this book, and because Jefferson was fluent in French, Jefferson read the book in French. It's called The Ruins The Ruins, Ruins, The Ruins of Empire. I want you to go and read page 606 of this book. And once you read that book, that page of that book, you have to read, it'd be good to read the whole book, but I know your time is limited. So read that one page. And then you come back and talk to me about these televangelists on these networks. But read that page first, and then we can talk. You have the background to have this conversation, but you're not ready for it now because I know how they get over on you and so on. But they're part of the mob also. And I wrote about Obama's the setup that Obama was involved in. But I'll tell you tomorrow what I'm writing about. I'm writing about these judges. I'm going to be taking on in part 3 of this three-part series. I'm going to be taking on James Bozeman, not Bozeman, Boasberg. I would like to call him Bozo. James Boasberg, the guy that has elevated himself up to the level of the separation of powers, and this man is a district judge, a circuit judge in Washington D.C. This man has elevated himself up to the separation of powers that we have in terms of the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the Supreme Court. That is the judicial branch. The lower courts were set up by Congress, but the Constitution sets up the Supreme Court. The 3 branches of government are those 3 branches of government. And they got this man thinking he can order a president of the United States around, and Donald Trump is groveling around to get the court to rein this man power in when the man is given executive power by the Constitution of the United States. It's unforgivable. I support Donald Trump. I'd be the first one to admit I support Donald Trump because he's the best out there. Man is a politician patriot. That separates them from the rest of them. They're not patriots, they're politicians. People don't understand that when you set George Washington up as the greatest president this country has had. But George Washington was the greatest president this country had because, yeah, he was a politician. You have to read about the man's life. The man was a politician, but the man is a patriot in the office there. It takes a patriotism to do what George Washington did. He didn't take a patriot to do what George Wallace did, but what George Washington did took a patriot to do that. They're trying to make this. They're throwing flowers at this man. They're trying to make this man a king because the world had only obeyed kings up to the point of George Washington. George Washington, the first president that's elected in the history of the world. We had never had presidents before George Washington. The first president in the history of the world was George Washington. Did something that had never been done before. And then after being elected president, did what he had done when he was a commander-in-chief of the armed services of the United States, where no one could have stopped him. I have to say this about my hero, who belongs to Mount Rushmore by himself, by the way. They don't belong up there with George Washington. They tried to make George Washington king. And George Washington, after serving 2 terms, stood down and went home. And you have to celebrate that because if he had gotten it wrong, you would never had a United States of America. And that's why it's wrong to put anybody up there. Not that they were trying to do injury, but this is about understanding the history of the country. And so few actually do. They write about it. These are parrots. These are parrots. Parrots write history. And that's why it's so repetitious of what is being written. You know, that's why everybody's saying right now that Abraham Lincoln is our greatest president. Like hell. But somebody said it and it's being repeated. Everybody's now saying that. Everybody's saying that. If you go out there and say Abraham Lincoln was not, and they got George Washington down there number 3 after Abraham Lincoln, and then they got another president in there before they get to George Washington, and that's Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You got, you know, I try to take you as a serious person, but when you do stuff like that right there, I can't respect that and don't take you seriously. You're not serious doing that. Putting Franklin Delano Roosevelt as the second greatest president this country's had. You got to be kidding me. You're not serious. And you need to be called on that. But people need to stop mimicking and mouthing and imitating these voices out here, these parrots out here saying stuff like that. You can't say stuff like that and be a serious historian. And all of the historians are saying that. Every last one of them is saying that. I don't know of any historian that would not say that. They're parrots. Because that's not true. George Washington is the greatest president this country's had, and everyone else that has come after George Washington is below that level. And they got Barack Obama as number 12. You got to be kidding. Barack Obama belongs down there close to where Joe Biden is. Joe Biden, it belongs at the bottom, and Barack Obama does not belong too far removed from that level. He's also close to the bottom himself. This man was a terrible, horrible president. And I call today unequivocally, unapologetically for this man to be tried for high crimes and misdemeanors against the United States of America. Because this man was trying to undermine a duly elected president of this country. And that's what Obama was doing, and he was doing it knowingly, trying to rescind the election of this country in cahoots with Putin and some of the others. Not that they were sitting around a room smoking cigars together, any of that. Didn't have to. They were working toward the same ends. And they didn't have to, in fact, cajole in the same room to do it. They had a common objective. And their objective was to defeat Donald Trump. But they didn't have the same interest in doing that. Putin had an interest in Hillary Clinton being elected, different from the incentive that Obama had and the incentive that Hillary Clinton had. But they had an incentive to get it both. But they had an incentive to get Hillary Clinton president. But Putin had that incentive also. But Putin, do you agree with this, you scholars, that Putin had an interest in it also, because Putin would have because Putin wanted to have a lead into quieting down not that there was any nationalism there in the first place, but to quiet down any nationalist intentionalities that were left on the left by these leftists like these Solinsky's, which is what she is. To quiet even that part down, because they're already involved in treason, but he wanted to guide it so it benefits Russia. That's the claim. That's why he was quiet about this assertion that he had helped Donald Trump. He knew he hadn't helped Donald Trump, but look how quiet he was, and he did not come out and make the claim of what Hillary Clinton was in fact doing. He never repudiated that he wasn't trying to help Donald Trump. They were blaming him for helping Donald Trump. He never said, "I'm not helping the man." He went along with that. But I'm telling you why he went along with it. Blackmail. They thought they would have. Putin thought he would have an advantage if she was president. He would not have that advantage with Trump, and he didn't have an advantage with Trump, as Trump has proven by him taking stands. Number one, to make this country energy independent, and get person to buy their oil from the U.S. because it has more natural oil to be made to be turned into oil. Let me tell you another thing while I'm on this point. I meant to make this a long time ago. The other thing is that this idea that oil is a fossil fuel, that's also incorrect. You never run out of oil. You know why? Because oil is made because oil is being made as we speak. It's not a fossil fuel. And you don't run out of oil because it's not a fossil fuel where some dead animals died and then somehow the oil was, get away from me, get out of here. The capacity for oil is ongoing because nature continues to create it. I called today, and I will say it again, I called for Barack Obama's arrest. First of all, his indictment, his arrest and trial, and if he's found guilty, his incarceration for the rest of his life for treason, high crimes, and misdemeanors and treason against this country, because that's what this man was involved in 2016. Okay, I need to say something else, but we are running out of time. I'll pick it up next week to continue this because I do not want to run from it. I want you until next week to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.